Welcome back, my fellow game developers, to a brand new video. And in this one, if I maximize on play to see everything, when I run the game, you'll notice that the boss appears from the ground and starts walking towards us. And when he gets to a certain position, he starts clobbering us. Clobbering, is that even a proper verb? He starts clobbering us with his giant sword. So let's not waste any more time and let's get started. Okay, so now let's make the enemy actually walk, or not enemy, the boss actually start walking towards the player. So how are we going to do this? If we go to the animator, first thing we want to do is we want to transition from the appear to the actual walking. So I'm going to create in here a transition into the walking, and there is going to be no condition. There is only going to be an exit time and maybe a transition duration. Let's see how that looks. So the enemy appears, and there you go. You can see that when he finishes appearing, he then transitions into the walking. You can play around in here. So for example, let's increase the exit time to 97%. So he finishes appearing completely. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so there is a kind of an error here. And I want to do all of this in front of you just so you can see how things happen. Maybe it will take a bit of time more from the video, but I have to show you this. I don't want any confusion. Anyways, now that we have the walking, it's actually time to first of all find the transform of the player, get a rigid body, find the direction and so on, add the velocity. How are we going to do this? Well, as you know, we have all of these states set up right here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on the walking, and you can see right here that I can add something called a behavior. So let's click on add behavior. Let's go ahead and create a new script, and instead of boss getting angry, for some reason we are going to call this the boss walk. So adding a behavior script to a state has a different type of naming convention. I'm going to use, well, not actually me, Unity uses the underscore, so I'm going to keep with that standard, let's say. So create and add, wait for the file to be imported, and there we go. Now we have the boss walk. If we click on and see where that actually is, there we go, in the assets. It's immediately in the assets. So if I, any day now, if I, let's make this a bit bigger so we can properly see the folders, and you can see that it's just on the assets. And for that reason, I'm going to go into the scripts in here, right click and create a new folder for the boss or boss system. Let's call it the boss system, hit enter, and then back in the assets, we'll drag this into the boss. There we go, into the boss, click on walking. Is the script still there? So the new version of Unity is extremely bad. Anyways, hopefully yours doesn't take so long to compile and understand everything. So now let's double click on the boss walk and let's see what we have in here. As you can see, we don't have a mono behavior anymore. As you can see right here, mono behavior is usually reserved to a script that will be attached to a game object. So something that will move. For example, in here, we don't have a mono behavior, we have a state machine behavior. And this is a script that is attached only to certain states. So let's continue on. What do we have here? Just like we have the start and update on the mono behavior, we have the on state enter and the on state update. We also have the on state exit, on state move, and the on state IQ, whatever that is. Anyways, we will not be focusing on the last two, so we can go ahead and delete them. And in here, I'm going to select all of these lines because they are commented out. And we can uncomment everything using the Control K U. There we go. So make sure that you hold down Control and press KU at the same time. As you can see, we have a lot of errors, and that's because these lines are actually the comments. So just like in here, we have over the update the comment. Update is called every frame. You can see in here on state enter is called when a transition starts, and on state update is called each update, and on exit is called on the transition's end. Okay, excellent. So now let's continue on. In here I'm going to create first of all the transform for the player to chase. Then I'm going to get a rigid body 2D. So boss rigid body, no, boss rigid body 2D. Or you know what, let's not have the 2D. This whole game is a 2D game, so we won't need that. And a vector3 dot direction to move in. So just like regular enemies, we have the components of the boss walking and so on. So now that we have these, it's time for a bit of a challenge. And your challenge is going to be to find the player and get the rigid body. So first of all, think of where we should be getting all the references. So usually we use the start, but now we don't have start. So where should we be, you think, where we should be using, where should we be getting all of our components? Then we'll need to find the player, obviously. Then we'll need to get the rigid body on the boss. And I'm going to give you a small hint. We will need to use the animator from the parameters. So what do I mean by the animator from the parameters? Let me just show you that. So if we go in here, you can see that on the on-state enter, on-state update, and on-state exit, we have certain parameters in here, and one of them is the animator. So we have immediate access to the animator. That's what you're going to use in order to get the references. So back and forth to our challenge. This is a bit hard. Do your best. Try different things, different tricks, make mistakes, do your best. There's no pressure on you. Pause the video right now and go do the challenge. Okay, welcome back. So because we don't have start, we are going to use the on-state enter. And the way on-state enter works is as soon as we enter into the state, we will set up the parameters and then we will be seeing what we want to do later on. For now, we're going to go ahead and use the player chase. What is the player chase? It's going to be the game object dot find object of type, or actually, where is it? Find object of type, and it's going to be the player controller. Nope, not the bullet, the player controller. So find object of type. I believe we've seen this before, and we used game object because we can't just use game object without having the mono behavior up here. So we need the game object last, then we get the find object of type, we get the player controller, and finally we need to get the transform of that game object that we found. So now we have a reference to the player to chase. Next we need the rigid body. So I'm going to say that the boss's rigid body is equal to the animator dot get component, and we are going to get the rigid body 2D. And did we add a rigid body to the boss? Let's check that out and see if we did. If we click on the skelly, nope, we didn't. So let's go ahead and add a rigid body 2D. There we go. So now we have a rigid body. And let's make sure that we freeze the rotation on the Z, and we make sure that the gravity scale is 0. There we go, save that. If you don't want to be able to push your boss around, you can make sure to set it to either kinematic but not static, or maybe even static, but I think he will not be able to move. Anyways, let's continue on. Now we need to make sure that the enemy or the boss actually starts moving. So where should we be doing that? Well, obviously it should be in the update. So in update, I'm going to say that we have a vector2, which is the new position that we should be in, and it's going to be equal to the vector2 dot move towards. And what should we be moving towards? It should be the boss dot rigid body dot position. So this will be, as you can see right here, first of all we have the current, then we have the target, then we have the distance max. So in here we are going to go ahead and say that position, rigid body, so of the boss's rigid body obviously. Then we are going to say that the player chase dot position is the target, and I'm going to create up here a public float speed, and this will be the speed at which we are going to be moving in, and then a public float attack range, and this will be an attack range later on that we'll use. So in here what we're going to do is we're going to say that we are going to move at the speed, but we are going to add to it time dot fixed delta time. And why fixed delta time, and what's the difference? You can see in here the interval in seconds at which physics and other fixed frames rate updates. So it's almost the same as delta time, but it's fixed delta time. It just adds a bit of extra performance to the game. And for some reason I noticed when we use the regular delta time we have some weird behavior because we are in a animator. Maybe that's the reason, I'm not 100% sure, but what I found using fixed delta time, which is exactly like delta time, just fixed and more precise. So let's continue on. Finally, what do we want to do when we get into a certain range? We want to start attacking our player. So if the vector2 dot distance between the player to chase dot position and the rigid body, the boss rigid body dot position, if it's less than the attack range that we've created up here while we were creating the speed, then in here we are going to say that the animator dot trigger dot set trigger, and we are going to start attacking. So let's go back into our game. Let's create a transition between the walking and the attacking, and a transition between the attacking and the walking. And in here we are going to make sure that we don't have any exit time, or no, actually let's keep that because sometimes we might need it. So in here we are going to say that we want to attack. This will be the name of the trigger. The condition to transition from walking into the attack is going to be the trigger attack. I'm going to paste it in here, save that. And now in here I'm going to see how are we going to get back. So first of all we go from the walking, we start attacking, but then how do we get back? First of all, let's see how that will look. So I'm going to run the game, and we are going to look at our player behavior. So as you can see, he appeared, but for some reason he is not moving, and he slides away very easily. So let's go to the Skelly boss and let's see what the problem is in here. Maybe we should make him a bit dynamic or kinematic. Let's try this again. Run the game. He appears, he starts walking, and when we are in range, as you can see, he is, there you go, everything seems to be working. The only problem is that we are being rendered on top of him. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to check for the sprite and the boss layer. So this is your preference. Do you want to appear behind the boss, in front of the boss? But actually what we want is maybe to appear behind the boss. We don't want to be walking over the boss. So in the layers, edit, and bullet player, there we go. So now when we run the game, now there is an obvious problem in here that, okay, so we are rendered behind the boss. That's good. He is fighting us. He is doing one attack, then another attack, then walking a bit, then another attack. But here the problem is that he is still not walking towards us. That's because we didn't actually make the boss move. This was a mistake on my part. The rigid body on the boss, we can use the move position, and in here we are going to set it as the new position. So save that. You can see right here, move position. Does it do moves the rigid body to position? Save that, back in our game, run the game, and now we should see that when the boss appears, he starts walking towards the player, and he starts hitting the player and walking towards him. But as you can see, he is not facing the right direction, and he is stopping too close to the player. That's because if we click on the Skelly boss, on the walking right here, pause that, you can see that the speed and the attack range need to be maybe a bit bigger. So let's make it maybe 5. Let's see how that looks. Run the game. And now he gets close. Then you can see he starts fighting us and he starts walking towards us. So that looks kind of good. I believe we don't want to be able to walk behind the boss. I don't like it a lot, so maybe this should not be a trigger after all. Maybe you should be able to just hit the boss on the head. It's not a huge deal if we can't actually walk through this. Or you can make the, for example, the grid, the wall, change the wall to a certain level and make sure that the boss doesn't interact with the wall, which I think is a really good idea. Maybe we'll test that out. Let's save that. But for now, everything seems to be working good. There is the problem of obviously the flipping of the enemy, and we have to do a couple of fixing for the movement, but we'll keep that for a later video. For now, I hope you enjoyed, I hope you are committing your changes, and I'll see you in the next one.